Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mark Molina, CEO of Molina Leadership and Business Development Solutions. Today, I'm very excited to have the CEO of the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce, Brittany Quick-Warner. She has been in charge of the chamber now for a couple of years. And so we're going to begin with her bio, her introducing herself, and we're going to start this interview process with hearing a little bit about her leadership story, her leadership development, and how the circumstances in which she assumed leadership here at the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce. Brittany, welcome. Thank you. I'm very excited to have a chance to finally meet you.
Yes,
And,
no, yeah,
and,
thanks,
and,
Mark.
and Zoom is as good as meeting someone in person right now.
Yeah, it's what we get.
Yeah. So, you know, most of the people that I know, we haven't had a chance to really connect with you yet. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your education, things of that nature.
Sure, sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me. This is exciting for me too. I love getting to know folks and talking a little bit more about our chamber and the great work our staff are doing. Like you said, my name's Brittany Quick-Warner. I am originally from Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri area. I moved here a little over 8 years ago. My husband is from the area, so he grew up in Springfield and went to school in Eugene and stayed in town and went to Northwest Christian University, or formerly known as Northwest Christian University. So I moved out here when we got engaged, and I have fallen in love with the area and can't imagine being anywhere else. I originally, my bachelor's degree is in atmospheric science, which is super random and not really helpful for a chamber CEO. But if you ever need a guest meteorologist on a TV station, you let me know. I quickly decided, well, I shouldn't say quickly, it took me an entire degree, and then realized I wasn't going to do anything with that. So I went back and got my master's degree in public policy and management, with an emphasis and a focus on nonprofit management. I originally thought I was going into emergency management. I worked in emergency management after I graduated college for a few years. So a very interesting background that has proven to be really helpful in the midst of this crisis,
Yeah.
actually. Again, not one that I thought I would use so quickly, but our chamber has actually gone through quite a bit of crisis in the last couple of years. So it's been, it's been interesting to pull back on that knowledge that I have. When I first got to Eugene, I share a story with a lot of young professionals who come to this community, which I can relate to them, is that I moved here. My husband was really the only person I knew. It was kind of hard to meet people and to make friends. I moved here in 2012, which for those that remember, grads of 2012 had a pretty hard time finding a job. I think it was probably 6 or so months into my search, I had applied for, I think I had gotten up to like 50 different positions in the community. And just, not having any connections or ways to get my foot in the door. My husband told me that, he said, oh yeah, my buddy's dad works for the Chamber of Commerce. Maybe he can help you out. And I was like, really? 6 months into this, you finally remember that connection. So, and it proved to be really fruitful. I went in and I met Dave Hauser at the Eugene Chamber, and we totally hit it off. And he didn't have any permanent positions at the time, but he had a temporary position selling ads for the magazine.
Yes.
So I took it because I just wanted to do something helpful, and I was really, really bad at it. I realized that I was not the best magazine ad salesperson. So for those of you out there who did that, I commend you. But I loved the chamber. I loved the job. I did, through connections that Dave helped me make, I met actually Chris Pryor, who was at the time working at United Way.
Yes.
And Noreen Dunnels, and they had a volunteer management position open there. So I went over and I worked for United Way for about 8 months. And then a position opened back up at the chamber, and reached out to Dave, and I was excited to come back and join that team. So started at the Eugene Chamber as the events manager. Was in that role for about 8 months, and then kind of serendipitously, the director of business advocacy position opened up, and public policy is what I wanted to get into. So Dave kind of took a chance on me and let me promoted me into that role, and I was in that position for about 4 years before Dave got sick.
Now, what was that role again?
Director of Business Advocacy. So on in the Eugene Chamber, my job was full-time government relations, advocating on behalf of local businesses, working on community development projects, that sort of thing. So it was a really fun position. I loved it. That's by far my favorite part of this work of the chamber.
What was it like adjusting from Kansas City, Missouri? Oh, Josie Wells, right? I always chuckle when I hear that too. You know what I'm talking about? The outlaw Josie Wells, the Clean
Yeah.
Eastwood? Yeah.
Yeah.
What's it like for you making that adjustment, leaving your family, friends, all you know, to come to this strange and wonderful land called
Yeah.
Boone County?
Yeah, it was actually so I was living in Columbia, Missouri, where the University of Missouri is. That's where I got my undergrad and my grad degree. And it's a town almost the size of Eugene. It's a little bit smaller, but it's a college town. Kind of I don't know, a little bit of an urban epicenter amidst a pretty rural state besides the two, Kansas City and St. Louis. So the actual transition was pretty easy because it was really similar as far as the community goes. But it was hard. It was hard to make friends. It was hard to leave my family. My brother actually moved out here 2 years after me. He was my first person I was able to convince. I've been working on my parents ever since. But it was difficult. It was hard to make friends. That was one of the things that we talk a lot about. We have our chamber has a pretty robust young professionals program, and one of the things that a lot of people, young professionals, talk about is coming to Eugene and not having gone to college here or not being a college student. It's hard to meet people your age and to find a place. And that's one of the big goals of our young professionals program at the chamber, is to really help people do that. To help people find a place. I think that's how you get them to stay here, right? One of the ways that you retain talent is to help them feel connected to the community and help them build relationships that are authentic and makes it harder to leave.
Now, silly question. What was your interest in atmospheric science?
Oh man, I wanted to be a meteorologist since I was 8 years old.
Okay.
Growing up in the Midwest, we had a lot of severe weather. I was always so fascinated by it. I think I saw Twister for the first time. I think I was probably about 8 years old. And it was my favorite movie and I couldn't stop watching it. My mom always jokes, the one time I was grounded in my whole life was when I was probably 10 years old. There was a tornado siren going off. I ran out into the road. I wanted to see it so bad. And she's like, get inside or you're grounded. And I just wouldn't come in. And so she always likes to tell that story. So I stuck with it. I wanted to do meteorology all through middle, high school, into college. I was on the storm chase team in college.
Wow.
So yeah.
What was that like?
Big weather nerd. It was fascinating. The adrenaline, the impact that it has on communities and the way that you can support community members by helping them prepare for severe weather specifically is kind of what drew me to it. It is one of the things that was hard to adjust to when I came to Oregon. I feel like the weather here is so boring compared to the Midwest.
Yeah.
A lot of people like that, but as a weather nerd, I'm kind of like, come on, can we get a storm like every once in a while?
So you finished your degree, and how did you decide that you were not going to be a meteorologist and it was time to pivot to a different direction?
It's a really good question. So I spent the first 2 years, I actually had a dual degree with broadcast journalism. So I wanted to be a broadcast meteorologist. I realized that which is funny because I've been thrown back into this world. I love public speaking. I don't love looking at a camera and not being able to see my audience. And now here we are in this virtual world. It's what we've been doing for the last 2 months. I love interacting with people and kind of playing off folks. And so I just didn't love that environment. I also joked that I didn't want to have to wear makeup to the grocery store for the rest of my life. And now I'm a chamber CEO, and now I go to the grocery store and everybody knows me, so I feel obligated to wear makeup. So I decided I didn't want to do broadcast. Then I thought maybe I wanted to do research. I had an internship in Miami doing research one summer, and I was miserable. I hated being locked in a concrete building, doing science research all summer. I'm just way too much of a people person, an extrovert for that. yeah, so then I just couldn't really find a place that I thought I would love in that field. And that's when it really dawned on me that the part I love about it is helping people
Mhm.
and really trying to help navigate hard situations and making sure people are prepared. So that's why I kind of shifted more into the public policy world. So
Mhm.
um, yeah, it was an interesting shift, but
What did you discover about yourself in your master's program in public policy um, and management? What was different about you at that point?
oh, that's a really good question. I think that I think that it's I realized that I have just sort of like this almost like this generic passion for helping people be more involved in the communities that they live. And I had never in a million years imagined myself landing at a chamber of commerce, but it sort of is the perfect job for that. I just, I love empowering folks to actually get involved and to have a say. I think our communities, our democracy is working at its best when people are actually participating.
Mhm.
And I think that through my graduate degree in public policy and management, that was a huge component that I realized this is something I'm really passionate about, is figuring out how to help people navigate systems so they think they can so they feel like they can actually contribute and have a say. And to me, that's the best part about my job at the chamber, is being able to connect and be so intimately connected with what's going on in the community. So I can tell other people, here's what's happening, here's how it could impact you. Now go and have a say about it. Like, don't just sit back and let it happen.
So, what is the emphasis when you say emergency management? What is that comprised of, that education process?
Yeah, so it's a lot of crisis management. It's a lot of it's problem solving. I mean, emergency management really is problem solving at its core. It's really trying to figure out, okay, here's the situation that we're in. Here's where we want to get. Now, how do we get there?
Mhm.
It's learning how to deal with people when they're at their most stressed out, anxious, frustrated point, and
Mhm.
try to bring some calmness to their life to kind of help them step back and think through what it's going to take to get to a place where they aren't feeling like that anymore. It's a lot about pulling partners together and collaboration and strategic planning. I'm a very much a strategic thinker, and I really like to kind of put pieces together and connect things to try and figure out how to maximize and get the most
Mhm.
out of it. And so, um, yeah, I think managing a crisis that's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, I want to talk about that just a little bit more because I'm a former professional soldier, and so my background in operations, I was in the infantry several years, and one of my positions in Germany, I was what's called a NEO, NEO, NCO, or non-combatant evacuation operations,
Oh yeah, okay.
NCO. And so I had to work with the Air Force, the German government. We had to plan evacuation routes, all of these things in case of war. And then, so I'm thinking when you say emergency management, I'm thinking planned failure of
Yeah.
what's a city or a hospital or something like that. Does it go that far into that educational?
Absolutely, yeah. So I worked for the state emergency management department in Missouri. Most of our crises were natural disaster related.
Mhm.
So we're talking about energy disasters. We're talking about flooding. We're talking about tornadoes, earthquakes. There's a pretty decent fault line that goes through the eastern side of Missouri. Um, and there's phases of emergency management or emergency kind of recovery. You have your, once there's a disaster, you have your response phase, you have moving into recovery, but then there's also mitigation, and that's really where the planning comes in. How do we mitigate if there is a disaster? How do we make sure that our infrastructure, that our systems are in the best possible state that they can be to survive through some sort of crisis? And so that's a huge component of it, right? That actually is the bulk of the work that gets done. And then once the crisis happens, that's the piece that everybody sees. It's similar in public health, right? Where we're experiencing that live right now is that a public health professional knows that they've done the best job they possibly can when people don't actually think that it was as bad as they said it was going to be, right? What a ironic kind of world to live in, that you did a good job if people aren't impacted the way that you're trying to warn them that they could be.
Right.
And so emergency management's the same way, right? If you've prepared well enough, the disaster won't actually be as bad as it could be if you didn't prepare well enough. And so, it's just an interesting kind of career to be in, or field to be in. And it's military, it's government, it's, there's all types of folks, businesses, right? Business continuity planning. You plan for the worst and then hope that doesn't happen. So there's definitely a skill set that can be used everywhere.
That's a new term for me, business continuity planning. Let's talk about that a second.
Yeah, I think that there's, we in our staff and our community, we talk about it a lot in relation to this big earthquake that we might, inevitably have. And it's interesting because of the type of crisis that we're in right now. A lot of those things that people are like, that's going to happen eventually, I'll plan for it at some point, but they haven't made it a priority. One of my hopes is that this specific crisis will help prompt us to prepare better for this earthquake that is going to happen. Because folks it's like become a real thing to them now, right? Some sort of crisis is real and they're thinking more strategically about, wow, what did I not have ready? What do I need to have ready next time? Business continuity planning is so critical to the life of a business. In most disasters, the research out there, and again, this really kind of relates to single incident disasters, where not totally different than what we're in right now, but businesses like who can't get back on their feet and sort of get, orient themselves within like a week to 2, maybe, have such a significantly lower chance of surviving that crisis. If you have a business continuity plan that lays out what's going to happen if your office is compromised, what happens if half your staff suddenly aren't able to show up because they were somewhere else during a crisis, or they get sick, what happens if you lose data? How do you make sure that data is backed up? So if there is a fire or an earthquake or something, that, you're prepared for all those different scenarios, because the continuity of your business is what's going to obviously, it's going to help you survive. If you can't continue on, then you don't have a business anymore. And so you got to be able to do that.
Very good. Thank you for that expansion.
Yeah.
So you start working for the chamber part-time after looking for 6 months before your husband remembers.
Yeah. I always tease him about that. I'm like, you were lucky I didn't leave you at that
point. No doubt. What did you learn about yourself selling ads? Why do you say you were not any good at it?
Oh my gosh. Well, one, I think that I didn't have relationships, and a lot of working in a town like this, relationships are so important. At that point, I was kind of starting cold. So I think maybe I'd be a little bit more successful now because I do have some of those relationships, but I learned how important that is. I always, my husband and I joke about how when I first started at the chamber, I would call someone and they'd be like, Quick-Warner, are you married to that basketball player? He was a big basketball player in high school and college. And now he calls and people are like, oh, Quick-Warner, are you related to the chamber president? So I tease him how the tables have turned. Yeah. But it's just, I learned that it's a lot about relationships and being able to really understand what people need. And especially in sales, it's people can see through someone who isn't authentic and really cares about the customer in the end of it. So yeah, it was a good learning experience for me.
So are you implying that you weren't authentic, or are you trying to say that you were just off balance because you had these dynamics of no knowledge of the locale, no knowledge of the customer base, no knowledge of, the history of this new place you found yourself in?
Yeah, for sure. That definitely the latter. I think that in sales specifically, anytime you come into a new community, it takes a while to kind of understand exactly what the community is like and what people need, and what the background for each of those businesses are. And it just takes time. I was only in the role for about 4 weeks before I got the job at United Way. So I didn't have the time under my belt to build those relationships yet, but it helps because once I went back to the chamber that later that year, when I'm moving into the events position, it was great because I had kind of already started building those relationships.
Yeah, I had served when Chris Pryor was running the American Red Cross. I was on the board of directors there
Oh
with
wow,
him, as well as on the board of directors for the United Way under uh,
Priscilla?
Priscilla Gould. Right
Yeah.
there, you go. It's been a while since I've
Yeah.
What did you learn? What did they ask you to do when you went over there, and what did you learn about yourself?
Yeah, so I was hired over there as a volunteer manager. They actually hadn't had anybody in that role for 4 or 5 years, I think, when I came over. And so it was a really fun time. They were really trying to rebuild the position and figure out how to better engage the community in a volunteering capacity. So obviously, they have folks advocate, they have folks give, and they have folks volunteer. And um, but the volunteering part was one that needed some systems put in place. We built a volunteer database. We kind of kicked off some of the day of caring activities. So they had their typical day of caring in the fall, but we put an education day of caring together. Really, my job was I worked with a lot of businesses in that role to try and help coordinate volunteer opportunities for their employees. So that was really fun. I loved the United Way, and I still just have so much respect for that organization. One thing that I learned and that I've carried with me when I left United Way and came to the chamber is how incredibly similar our organizations are. I really do believe this about a lot of organizations in our community, that we ultimately have the same goal of creating and providing opportunities for people in our community to live happy, healthy lives. We just approach it from different perspectives and use different language to talk about it, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And I think that, the Chamber as a community development organization and United Way as a community development organization have so many similarities when it comes to collective impact, right? So I kind of consider the chamber one of the original collective impact organizations because we have 1,200 members that are collectively coming together to try and get stuff done in the community on behalf of the community. And we have shared goals and shared metrics that we use, and that's really the definition of collective impact. And it's been really, just in the last couple of years as I've been in this role, the CEO position at the chamber, I've, spent a lot of time working with United Way and talking to Noreen, their ED over there, about how we can better integrate the human service world and the economic development business world to get more done for our community. And so I'm so grateful for the experience that I had working over there, just because I have better knowledge of their organization. Granted, they've done a lot and changed since I've been there 7 years ago, I think now. But yeah, it's really cool to have that background.
You come back to the chamber and you're the new events manager.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about what you learned about yourself, about leadership, and about the community in that position.
Yeah, so that role, I have so much respect for event managers. I think that there's a lot of similarities to emergency managers in that situation. I think that um, being able to put on a good event, and especially large scale events, is an art. It's all about being able to deal with adversity and to be nimble and flexible, and to be able to pivot very quickly. If you have a problem over here, you can deal with it. And to handle the anxiety of that type of role, you have to have a really special personality. So I feel like I used a lot of my skills from the emergency management world in that position as well. Just being able to respond quickly to things as they were happening. It was super fun. I got to meet the most members that I probably could have met in that role, because
Mhm.
we have so many diverse members that show up to our events. And it was a great way for me to really get a good sort of perspective of our membership. I also learned um, that it's exhausting.
Yeah.
That putting on, multiple dozens and dozens of events, large scale events every day throughout the year is exhausting, and gotta have a lot of stamina in that position.
Hmm. And then you went on to director of business advocacy.
Yeah.
That's quite the switch from event manager to director of
Yeah.
business advocacy. So talk to us a little bit about, I'm loving hearing your story and watching and hearing. And in my mind, I'm seeing your chronological development as a leader. And
Yeah.
so this is why I'm asking you the questions that I am, because I think it's important that that this is part of your story that's heard and told and understood.
Thank you.
What did you learn about yourself going over to Director of Business Advocacy? How did you grow there?
Yeah. So that position is really what helped me get to know the community best, I think. In that position, my job was to kind of just scan the horizon for issues that were facing our community and that specifically were going to impact the business community. I built up really strong relationships with all of our elected officials at the state, at the city, at the county. I started working really closely with the city of Eugene and Linn County staff. I learned so much about all the different departments and the way that the city works and who to go to if we have a problem, if a business has a problem. Here's who you go to, and here's how we can um, help get it solved. I learned a lot about how to advocate, frankly, for businesses. I think that the position is really unique, and this is something that when I got into this role that Dave was super upfront with me about, is that we never want to take someone's individuality away from them in a position like that, but your job is to advocate on behalf of the business community. So when you have your chamber hat on, you have to represent the broader business community. It's really hard to do because we don't have this homogenous business community, right? It's like anybody who's asked to represent a group of people. It's never one single opinion or point of view. But our chamber's perspective, and I know the Springfield Chamber shares this as well, is that the way that we do the best we possibly can for our members in the community is to be data driven, and to be realistic and to not be hyperbolic in our advocacy. We never want to be an organization that is, the sky is falling, because the reality is, like Dave always said this too, is the day after the election, you still have to show back up to work, right? You can't paint this picture of doomsday and then know that you're going to show back up the day after. You have to be realistic with what you're asking for, and you want to be data driven. And
Love
another thing that's really interesting is sometimes I'm advocating on behalf of a position that I don't personally necessarily agree with. And that was something that was interesting to learn how to do. And the way that the way that we do that, and the way that I am 100% comfortable doing it, is that it's data driven, and we use real life experiences from businesses. And I can't argue with that. If we're talking about a controversial issue, and I can tell a story of how this is really impacting a local business, and it's truthful and it's authentic, there's nothing about that is against my moral code, right? And I want to be able to do that for businesses. So even if I don't personally agree, as long as we take that path of trying to be the sane center, right? We're not trying to radicalize our chamber, our positions, and we do represent folks who lean more conservative or lean more liberal. And so again, finding that middle ground, trying to help bring people together to negotiate, to collaborate, to compromise. I loved doing all that. I thought it was really, really rewarding, and helping people see the bigger picture too. I think the chamber staff have this really we're in a unique position to be exposed to way more information than maybe a member is individually. And so sometimes our job is to help those members understand the full picture so then they can develop an opinion, or, help us understand how it impacts them. So we both get to educate and advocate in this role. And I love that work.
So two questions. First one, for those that are going to watch this and don't know what hyperbolic means.
Yeah, so we just don't want to throw out exaggerations. I don't want to say that this specific bill is going to put hundreds of thousands of businesses out of business when that's not even realistic for our community, right? And I think sometimes in the advocacy world, it's easy to have really radical positions like that. But I don't think it's effective, especially in a community like ours where we have such diverse opinions in our elected officials and in our community. You have to be able to be realistic in the way that you're advocating in the stories that you're telling.
Okay, thank you for that. And data driven. Why is that so effective? Why do you believe in it so much? And why is that the best approach towards your interactions with your members and the community?
Yeah, so maybe it's the scientist in me, but I really think that data is hard to argue with. And if you can actually, I do know that nowadays you can change a statistic or find a statistic that, backs up your point no matter what it is. But if I'm able to show, okay, here's these 25 businesses I've talked to, and 20 of the 25 have done this X, Y, and Z calculation for, this minimum wage increase or this tax increase. And here's the real dollar amount that it's going to impact. And here's the real number of employees that it's going to impact. Someone can check my work, right? It's not, no one can call me out and say, you're just making that up. If you're actually, truthfully following the data and getting and collecting that data, that's hard to argue with. And that's the point that I think a lot of our elected officials are asked to do the impossible when they aren't exposed to that data. They have no idea. They don't have those, not all of them have the business relationships or the resources to reach out and get a real story from a business. And that's our job, is to make sure to provide those real stories.
Hmm. Well, I've noticed, as you know, I'm on the board of directors for the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce, and
Oh,
since Vani has been working at the Oregon State Chamber, her participation there, especially as chairman, our information has increased dramatically.
yeah,
And I feel like we're more informed as board members. We're better prepared and more ready to make better decisions, more practical, useful, helpful decisions because we have the data and the information that we need. So
that's right.
I think it's really important that leaders not, number one, exaggerate in that manner, but also have something to respond with to whoever
Mhm.
they're representing, whoever they're speaking to.
Yeah.
I appreciate that commentary.
Yeah, I think it's also so important to be able to admit when you were wrong, right? I think that a good leader doesn't have to always be right, and they can recognize when they weren't right, because we're always gonna make mistakes, and we're always gonna get new information that suggests maybe something should be differently than what we originally thought. And so to not be afraid to say, you know what, we totally got it wrong. This is how we thought it was going to impact folks, and based on this new information, it's going to look like this instead. And to, I think that's how you build trust with people, is to admit when you're wrong. I think people really appreciate that.
Very good. So you're back at the chamber. Dave Hauser, and Dave was a good man. I remember working with Dave and going through the leadership program and much of the staff at that time. He gets sick. He's diagnosed with cancer.
Mhm.
Tough times, hard times for your staff, for the community, because of the role that he played. How were you mentioned into the process for leadership? What was that like for you?
Yeah. It was the hardest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. If I'm totally honest, Dave and I were super close in the business advocacy role. We kind of interchanged in a lot of the scenarios that we were in. If Dave couldn't go to a council meeting, I was there. If Dave couldn't go to this meeting, I was there, and vice versa. And so he was my mentor, and he saw really early on in me that I was addicted to chamber life. And we had talked years before he got sick about, if I would ever be interested in having a career in the chamber world. And, I was like, yeah, I think that at some point that seems like something I would like to do. And to be a chamber executive, he encouraged and supported me to go through the Western Association of Chamber Executives. There's an executive training program called Academy. It's a 3-year training program that I started 3 years before Dave got sick. And I got so much information through that program, and it was wonderful to have all of that. And I was super blessed that I had gone through that program before I got into this position. But when Dave got sick, he originally told our staff in a staff meeting, and for those who know Dave, know he's a really private guy, and he didn't want people to know yet. He wasn't ready for the whole community to know. And so he told us he was going to try to work through it. He was going to start chemotherapy and radiation, and he was going to continue to work. And I think it was a few days into his treatment that he realized that was not going to be possible. So he called me and said, let's chat tomorrow, and just said, can you just fill in for me for the next 5 weeks while I'm going through treatment? If you can just go to my meetings and be on point for staff if they need anything. He was still there for me. We were talking multiple times a day. And I was like, of course I can do anything for 5 weeks. If it means supporting you, like, I'm up for the challenge. And it was really, really hard. Folks didn't know he was sick. And so, I wanted to respect his privacy, and we did that by trying to just be at everything and do everything we could to not drop the ball. Towards the end of January, we had our annual celebration of business event, and Dave had been with the chamber for 25 years, and this would have been the first event for him to miss. And so at that point, he agreed that it was time to let folks know what was going on. And so we told the membership at our celebration of business event, and I will never forget, there was just this collective gasp in this room of 700 people because folks had no idea. And it was this weird, like, sadness, but then also relief to kind of like feel like people finally knew what was going on, and that Dave could finally get the support from the community that I thought he needed and deserved. And he did. Folks came out to support us, to support me, to support him in droves, and it was awesome. At that point, Dave was continuing to go through treatment, and still wasn't well enough to come back to the office. And so the board eventually, at Dave's recommendation, appointed me officially in the interim position because we had a couple staff positions that needed hired, and he wanted me to be able to go ahead and do that. So again, we were just chatting every day, a couple times a day by phone, and he was, obviously advising me and helping me through that. And then we all thought he was coming back. He just maintained that he was recovering and he was going to be back. And I'll never forget the morning when his wife called me and let me know that he had passed away the afternoon before. And it was just, as much as it was just like this thing where nobody wanted to prepare for that, because he was convinced that he was going to make it. And so we were convinced he was going to make it. And so, it was, I called my board chair, and I called John Reese, who was a city manager at the time. And he physically ran down from his office and sat in my office all day, while I called our board members and the media and folks, and just sat there and supported me through it. Him and John and Dave are really close. It was just this incredible time that I will never forget. I learned a lot. I was totally overwhelmed. To be honest, I still am most days. But our board was incredible during that time. I had Mandy Jones, who was the CEO of Oregon Community Credit Union at the time, was the board chair, and I could not have asked for a better person to be in that role, to be supportive of me. She asked me a handful of days after Dave passed away if I was interested in the position full time, and I told her no, that there was no way I could do it. I was 30 years old and I had no expectation of being a chamber CEO at that point. And I think that she had the wherewithal to just give me more time. It was a couple weeks later, and I had this kind of like an out of the movie moment where I was doing something silly, like taking the trash out. And I just had this overwhelming sense of Dave in my head being like, what are you thinking? Like, we've been talking about this. You have what it takes. Like, just go for it. And then Mandy called me the next day and asked me again. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll put my name in the hat. So then our board, it was the first time they'd had to hire in 25 years. So they had a big process they had to go through and work up job descriptions and interviews. And so I interviewed for the position, and they ended up appointing me officially in September of 2017, I believe.
How many people applied?
I don't actually know. I don't know. I know that I believe they interviewed a couple, but I'm not actually sure. It was a weird place to be, sort of like in the interim CEO, but then going for the job. I don't actually know that.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing that with me, because that too is part of your leadership story and part of your leadership development. And there's nothing more demanding of a human being than to have to come in to an organization in the manner, or help lead an organization forward in the circumstances that you had to do that, and you had to make some very heavy phone calls and very serious notifications and
Yeah.
bear up under a considerable weight. I'm not trying to make you sad.
It's all
I'm
right.
acknowledging, one of the most tender moments I had the years I was a pastor down in South Texas was one of our church members, their loved one passed away, and the morgue was so backed up that they couldn't come get the body of the loved one, and so it was so difficult. It was really they really needed to go because of the stress, and so they asked me if I would stay with their loved one until the morgue could come and get them, and it was my privilege and my honor, and I did so, so I could appreciate that story that you're telling, and I see how much it moves you still to this day. And this is part of I've listened to you talk. I've listened to you share your story. I've listened to you give us some historicity of your development, your exposure, your discovery of who you are as an individual. And quite frankly, I've never met you before today. We've never spoken before this moment in time, and I'm impressed.
No, thank
I'll be
you.
56 years old this month. I've been through a lot of things in my life, and I am truly impressed with how you've handled yourself, how you've grown. You've been very honest and forthright in this presentation today, this interview. You haven't tried to act like you're more than what you are, and you didn't try to present yourself
Thank you.
anything other than who Brittany Quick-Warner is today and how she got here. You've been 3 years. You were at the chamber post housing market crash, so you saw the economic difficulties of our community.
Yeah.
New to a community that has just got done hemorrhaging, and you had this incredible. I'm assuming newly married at that time, away from your family for the first time, into a community that's suffering economically, and this is the storm. As a you love to be a storm chaser,
Yeah, right.
and the storms of life brought you here in the manner in which it did, and here you are, on the outside looking in. You're observing the community, you're learning the community, you're identifying the needs of the community, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the eye of the storm, persevering and enduring. And I see the things you said you wanted to be and do as a human being from the time you were a child, wanting to help people. I see all of that being birthed in this incredible journey that you've just described to me. And whether you've seen it in that manner, or anyone's ever said it to you in that manner before, I'm saying it now that I can see this life call that you had is unfolding before you. Even it not only has it unfolded, but it's unfolding as you continue to lead and grow and adjust and adapt. And here you are, a chamber CEO in a pandemic, now trying to lead 1,200 organizations, and that's not including who they represent. And you're still in the midst of another storm, doing what you know that you've been predestined to do from the time you were a child. Now, how does all of that make you feel?
Gosh, overwhelmed. Oh man. Good. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard. And I am frequently questioning how in the heck am I the person in this job right now? But it's just, I'm surrounded by people who are incredibly supportive. It's, our staff got super close through, Dave passing away. I'm actually the only staff left on our team right now who worked for Dave. So we have a completely new team, and this crisis, like others, has brought us together more than anything I think could have. And then just my board, I'm so lucky as a nonprofit to have a board of directors, which I think Bonnie probably feels the same way, that is so inept so capable and so supportive, and just, they just get it. And they're there when they need you, and they're not there when they know they shouldn't be. And it's just I've been super blessed to have the support system around me that I have.
Well, there's no doubt that I believe that you and Vonnie are um, definitely the two individuals that need to be in charge in both organizations. There's no doubt that You two are doing a fantastic job. What's it like reaching across the aisle to Springfield, reaching into Lane County? You guys work together to get some funds together for small businesses. What's that been like for you?
Um, it's good and it's hard. I think it's both. We serve really different communities, and there's history, and there's so many things that Springfield does really well, that is a great balance for the things that Eugene does really well. And I mean, the communities and our chambers, to be honest. You know, Vonnie has been a chamber exec much longer than I have, and she's been an amazing mentor for me. She's, I think we have a good relationship. She's willing to call me out whenever I make mistakes, and she's willing to support me and praise whenever things go right. And I feel the same way with her. I think that's I'm definitely not the person who avoids controversy, or I don't know, maybe it's my Midwest roots. I'm not very passive aggressive. I feel like we just need to have a good, strong relationship. You need to be able to talk about the hard stuff and the good stuff. And Bonnie and I have that kind of relationship, and it's been wonderful. I've turned to her a lot for advice on things, and she's always been there for that. And then, granted, I've only been in the community 8 years now, but when she was new to the community, it was good for me to be able to be there for her, to help introduce her to folks, or help her navigate things that she was just learning too. So, yeah, I mean, I think our community is stronger for having both of our chambers, and we both have really different strengths that we bring to the table. But I think there's tons of opportunity to continue to collaborate on more things. I think that crises like these force us to innovate, and I think that's a really good thing. And so, her and I have talked a lot about what other things can we do together. We just launched a back to business reopening guide together. Both of our staffs worked over the weekend and through the nights to get this out for our members today, and it was great. I think they did a good job working together.
Yeah, I posted that on my personal Facebook page and my
Okay,
business Facebook page already.
that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that it's the parallel between you and Vonnie, both new to the community, coming from different places, yet able to have immediate impact is it's compelling. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, I caught Vonnie off guard a little bit when I first met her because I told her, because I spent so much time in the Army, and I met Colin Powell. He was what's called USUR, U.S. Army Europe. He
Hmm.
was the USUR commander when I was in Germany, and when President Reagan tapped him for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he was a three-star general at that time, and he came to all the units to say goodbye to all his soldiers.
Wow.
And I remember standing there in formation, and we're all in our dress uniforms, and I'm looking at him and I'm just in awe of this man, so dignified and so he just had this command presence that made you want to stand up taller.
Mhm.
But he was so humble, and he said, I remember I wrote down that day, he said, never have your ego so involved, tied up in the position, that when the position goes away, your ego goes away with it.
Yeah.
This is just a part of your life. It's not all of your life. But I remember that and his impact. And I told Vonnie, she always reminds me of a field grade military officer because the way her mind works and the way she sees high
Yeah.
the view, and she's able to organize. And then I see the two of you working together. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see the rhythm that you two have, and then the way you guys responded jointly with the county to get some funds out to small business. And that's what leadership looks like, Brittany. It
Yeah.
doesn't
Thank
matter
you.
who's getting the credit. It doesn't matter who's getting the attention. It's let's get to the business of taking care of business.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. So you've been the chamber CEO now for 3 years, 4 years,
Yeah, 3.5, I guess, counting the interim.
and you've completed the Western Association 3-year program. What's that called? Western Association of
Yeah, it's called
Chamber
the Academy.
Academy.
Mhm.
You've completed that. That's a 3-year process. How do you view yourself now in your development stage?
Oh my gosh, I still feel like I'm so early. um, I every day I'm learning something new. It's interesting because I'm running a chamber. It's a community organization, but it's also a business, right? We have staff and we have revenues and we have expenses, and we have to manage our personnel and our building. We own our building. That was one of the things I was like, oh man, I'm a property manager. I got to like replace an HVAC system. I don't know anything about that. So yeah, there's just all these things that I'm still constantly learning. But again, I have wonderful mentors in the community who stand ready and willing to help, and I'm not shy to ask them. I was really lucky and honored to be appointed to the Western Association of Chamber Executive board of directors, and then the National Association of Chamber Executives. I actually joined their board last summer as well, and
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. I just sort of felt like I don't know. I felt like I don't know, a fangirl. I like walk into these meetings and I have all these chamber crushes of chambers across the country. I'm like, oh, that chamber is doing something really cool, or that CEO is doing something really cool, and then they're serving on these boards. And so I just consider it a learning opportunity. I feel like in the chamber community, in the chamber industry, we're a very sharing industry. Folks, rip off and duplicate R&D. We borrow things from each other all the time, and while all of our communities are really unique, people are doing the same things in a lot of these communities. And if they have a really successful program that's worked in a community similar to ours, why not try to borrow it and adjust it to do something like that here in our community? And so I've loved getting to know and learn from other chamber executives across the country. It's been one of the best learning tools that I've had in this role for sure.
What are some of the areas that you've really grown in strength as a leader?
Oh, that's a good question. I think management. I mean, before I was in the CEO position, I didn't have any staff reporting to me. So I kind of overnight went from 0 to 9. And we've reorganized since then, and just organizational development. I've always had a passion for that. And I studied it during my grad program a lot. But the real world experience is nothing that you can replicate in a learning environment, or an educational environment. Yeah, so I think just people management, I've grown probably the most in that. Kind of started from nowhere, and just when you think you have the hang of it, you get thrown into a crisis where now everybody's working remotely and you're trying to manage a team, virtually across Zoom platforms. And yeah, it's just when you think you're starting to get the hang of it, everything changes. So that's definitely probably where I've had the most growth.
What are some of the areas that you want to work on personally for development, professionally for development?
Yeah, for me, it's communication. I think that a lot of times my staff, we've been doing a lot of leadership development internally with our staff, and really just trying to understand each other's personalities, and identify our strengths and weaknesses. And we've been using what's called the Giant leadership development system. And through that system, I'm a pioneer. It's what they call my personality type. I'm big picture, strategic, kind of future thinking. And I've got to do a better job of communicating how we get there, and communicating more regularly with our staff, and with, I think, with the business community, and with with our members. Yeah, it's something that I just have challenged myself to do better this year. And I think, again, it was one of those goals where then, you get into the middle of this crisis and you've been forced to communicate more regularly, because you kind of have to let folks know what's going on. So, yeah, definitely an area that I want to continue to grow in.
What are a couple of your focus areas and we're in the midst of this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
What are a couple of your focus areas that you, as a CEO, as a chamber CEO, you're keeping in the forefront of your thought processes right now?
Yeah. So for us, this was our big year for economic development. We launched a 501c3 foundation, kind of subsidiary this year, Onward Eugene, and the whole focus was on economic development. So really ramping up our community's regional marketing and business recruitment strategies, ramping up our business retention and expansion work. How are we helping to support the companies that we have here? We brought the entrepreneurial kind of ecosystem building work, so working with startups, we brought that into the chamber. and then talent and leadership development. So those 4 areas were kind of our big focus for this year with launching Onward Eugene. And I think it was serendipitous because the whole focus is on how do we strengthen our economy and grow our community to the best we can be. And so while the environment looks very different, the cause is even more relevant, I think, right now. And so we're excited to be able to shift kind of our programmatic focus to be more responsive to this crisis, but ultimately the same goal in mind. And that's, how do we create a community where people can live happy, healthy lives? And by establishing and creating prosperity for all, that's how we do it, and trying to have inclusive prosperity for our region.
That's the second time I've heard you say creating a community where people can live happy, healthy lives.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's the core of what we do. So
mhm.
it's important.
Yeah, business community, you got to have jobs, opportunities for people to provide for their families in advance and do well and be well.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So what about I'm a graduate of the Eugene Springfield Leadership Program.
Mhm.
How is that looking for this new year? What are your guys' thoughts? Have you guys begun to have conversations around that?
Yeah, so we have every intention of hosting it again this year. The staff on both the Eugene and Springfield teams have been getting creative. We have actually 2 classes from this last year's cohort that had to be canceled in person. So they're working on making up those programs virtually. And then we're kind of moving forward with planning for the year to come in hopes that we can host it in person, abiding by all the social distancing guidelines. And if not, we're going to figure out how to pull it off digitally, because it's an important program. I think it's one of the best things that our chambers does. It's building community leaders is critical for us to have a successful community, and we want business people in those leadership roles. So it's a really great program.
So what would you say to a prospective business owner in Eugene saying, look, we're just coming out of this crazy time. I'm not sure what's going to happen. Why should I even be concerned about joining the chamber or being concerned about what the chamber does?
Yeah. So for me, it comes down to a couple things. One is that business continuity that I talked about, right? I think that, um, you know, while I completely understand having to sharpen the pencil and get really strategic with the investments that you make, I think the chamber investment goes so much further than the actual dollars that you spend on your membership. You know, the work that we're doing is just trying to amplify what you're able to do as an individual business owner. We're not expecting folks to be able to show up at every city council meeting or, digest all the federal legislation as it comes down, by the hour, or go out and make all the connections on their own. That's what we're here for. And so those things are going to be critical to your business success. So my hope is that businesses can continue to invest in that. And if not, we're here to support you anyways. I think that's the bottom line, is that we want to be there to support you. I think the other thing is, and again, I talked a little bit about this earlier, it's this idea of collective impact. As an individual business, you might have $450 to invest somewhere. If you pool that with 1,200 other businesses' investment, you're going to get so much further down the road than if you were to just kind of, try to get somewhere with that on your own. And so to me, I think that's a huge deal, is our business community taking ownership of the betterment of our community. That's what the chamber exists for. I'm sort of just I'm the tool that helps get some of that work done, but the business community is the one who leads and directs what it is we're doing. So to have a voice at that table and to invest and to become a chamber member, I think is really important for businesses.
Mhm. What would your final comments, any words of encouragement or hope that you would like to offer the business community and the community in which you live and work? What would you have to say to them?
Through issue after issue that we've kind of dealt with as a business community, I am constantly encouraged by how resilient businesses are, right? And just people don't know how resilient you are. And I feel this way. It's kind of a lesson I've learned coming out of, both Dave's passing and this crisis. You have no idea how resilient you are until you're forced to be that way. And so I just think that we're going to get through it. Like there's no other option than to get through it. And so I think just keeping our eye on that prize and knowing that you're going to get bumps and bruises along the way. And, it could hurt you a lot, and you might have to pivot. You might have to totally rethink what it is you're doing, but there are people in this community to help support you in getting through this crisis. And so just trying the best that you can to keep that in the forefront of your mind, that like it might be messy and it might hurt, but you're going to get through this. And I'm, trying to remind our staff of that too, right? We, as an organization, it's getting rough. We're navigating the choppy waters too. And so, but we're going to get through it because we are resilient and our community is resilient. And I know we're going to make it out the other end. There's no other option.
All right, very good. All right, we've had with us this afternoon the Chief Executive Officer of the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce, Brittany Quick-Warner. Thank you for allowing this moment in time to spotlight your story, your history. History development is such a critical component of who we are, and especially as leaders, because continuum of
That's right.
exposure, this continuum of personal and professional growth and development. And thank you for allowing me to ask you so many questions and your willingness to share part of that story of your life with us. Thank you for today, and thank you for your time. And if anyone wants to contact you for any reason, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can reach out on social media or on via email. My email is brittanyw@eugenechamber.com, and you can Google me and find me on the chamber website.
Okay, very good. Well, Brittany, we look forward to seeing your continued growth and development, the success of the Eugene Chamber as much as the Springfield Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for your joint leadership with Vonnie and the community as a whole. Both of you are doing an amazing job, and don't give up the fight, because as the board is there for Vonnie, I know your board of directors is there for you. And as much as I know that we support Vonnie 1,000%, there's no doubt in my mind that your board supports you in the same way. So
Yeah,
continue
thank
on.
you.
Yeah, so continue on in your engagements, continue on in the fight, and we will all see each other on the other side of this.
All right. Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome. You have a good day.
Yeah, you too.